All right. Hello, everyone. Good afternoon, and welcome to Sharks4Kids Marine Science Hangout, where today we're going to focus on deep sea sharks with our guest, Christopher Bird. So my name's Joe Grabowski, and I'm Education Director with Sharks4Kids. I'm also a grade 8 science and math teacher in Guelph, Ontario. So for those who are new to Sharks4Kids, we're working to create the next generation of ocean and shark advocates through exploration, through education, outreach, and adventure. So again, thanks for joining us. I'm going to introduce each of our classes one at a time, and then I'll introduce our guest of honor, Chris, and he will talk to you about deep sea sharks. So I'm going to start off with, we have Mrs. Nicodem and Mrs. Crumley. They're 6th and 7th graders from Jonesville Middle School in Virginia. Say hi, guys. Hi! All right, thanks for joining us today. Our next class, I have Mrs. Santini and Mrs. Ganatos. They're grade 6 junior high class from Mount Prospect, Illinois. Say hi, guys. Hi! All right, awesome. Good to have you. We also have grade 1 class. So Mrs. Watkins Kuofs and Mrs. Beck's 1st grade class from Auburn, California, and they go by Club Koala. So awesome to have you with us today. Say hi. Say hi.
Hey guys.
And then we have 5th grade class, Mrs. Berkins from Britton Elementary School in Fort Stewart, Georgia. Go Knights. How's it going over there? Good. All right. So I know we're starting a little bit late. We did have a few difficulties and we blinked out. We actually are missing a class. We lost Mrs. Wineski's class from Catalyst Charter Middle School. So they're a 6th grade class from Ripon, Wisconsin. So hopefully they're able to join us as we go on. But we won't delay any longer. I'm going to introduce Chris. Christopher Bird, he's a PhD student at the University of Southampton in the United Kingdom. His previous work has involved working with sharks at the Bimini Biological Field Station in Bimini in the Bahamas, as well as Daero's Research Center in the Seychelles, and a master's project on blue sharks at Plymouth University. So his current research, he's working to understand the movements and feeding behaviors of some of the world's deepest living sharks, particularly in the North Atlantic, the Northeast Atlantic. So this field of deep sea shark biology is pretty exciting. It's not a lot is known about the shark species, so Chris's research, he's working to change that. So I'll let Chris give a better introduction to his research, and he's got a really cool presentation for you this afternoon. So Chris, if you want to take over.
Yeah, no problem. Hey, can you guys hear me okay?
Wave if you can hear Chris.
Everybody can wave. Awesome. Okay, so I'll see if I can share my screen. Thanks for the introduction, Joe. Okay. Let's see if this works. Can we see that okay? Yeah?
Yeah, looks good so far.
Awesome,
Everybody
okay.
on your end, wave if you can see the presentation. All right, thumbs are coming up all over the place.
Brilliant. Okay, awesome. Okay, yeah, so as Joe nicely said, I'm Chris over here in the UK, studying deep sea sharks. Now these sharks are very weird looking. We don't often see them. So you may have seen, obviously know about sharks from movies and from film posters and from on the TV, but not many people actually know about deep sea sharks. So these sharks live between about 200 meters and 4,000 meters underwater, and these waters are very dark, as you can see behind. There's very little food around there, which makes them very challenging environments. So I'm going to take you on a journey today and introduce you to a few of these sharks and see what they're like and what adaptations they have to help them cope with the deep. So just a quick brief introduction to myself. As I said, previously I was at Manchester University doing zoology. Now that's the study of animals, just in general, animal biology. So I worked on all sorts of things, from ants and beetles all the way to fish. So during my second year, I went out to Ecuador into the rainforest and worked with a tribe trying to uncover the different various fish that they find in their rivers there. And from this point on, I was really fascinated by fish. And from this point onwards, I really just wanted to study them even further. So this is when I went on to Bimini out in the Bahamas, and then got to work with sharks out there with these guys here. So down here on the left, we can see there's a juvenile tiger shark, which we caught, tagged, and released. And then we also have other juvenile lemon sharks and many other sharks around here. But I was just blown away by these amazing animals and just wanted to find out more. So this led me on to my master's degree in Plymouth. So here I work with a group of scientists trying to track the movements of blue sharks around the North Atlantic. So for that, we attached some satellite tags to their fins that you can see down here in the bottom. And then from that, we could use satellites and understand their movements around these oceans. And from that, we could see that they were moving in relation to their environments. They were following warm waters where there was lots of food, we think. So by this point in my kind of academic career, you could say I was kind of hooked by sharks. So from this, I was just driven to find out more and work with these sharks a lot more closely. Yes. I went out to the Seychelles for a few weeks and got to work on a previously kind of uncharted island, which is a great opportunity. So this is the atoll here up in the top left, St. Joseph's Atoll. And this is an important home for many sharks, it turns out, but we didn't actually know what sharks were around there. So it was our job to find out what sharks are around there. So we did a lot of diving, we did a lot of fishing, and then in this area we caught and tagged and then tracked about 3 or 4 different species of shark all around this island, and really found out that this is a very important region. Now there's research projects going on out there about the nursery grounds of this. So it really was a great little trip and just solidified my fascination with the sharks, as you might say. So then that brings me on to where I'm at now, which is my PhD in Southampton. So I'd kind of done the coastal sharks and the shallow water sharks, your kind of typical sharks as they were, I guess. And now I was concentrating on the deep sea. So these were a lot more mysterious, a lot more enigmatic, and I just really didn't know much about them, and that's kind of what drove me to want to find out more about these oceans, really. But I came here and didn't know anything, so then quick pop quiz for you guys. Show of hands, who's heard of a hammerhead shark? Yeah? I can't see your faces, but I'm going to assume you've heard of hammerhead sharks. And bull sharks maybe, tiger sharks, great white sharks. So these are your what you might think as your typical sharks, the ones that are taken in these beautiful blue backgrounds, these large predatory sharks, and they really captivate us. Really, they're beautiful animals. But then when you move to the deep sea, everything kind of changes. The sharks look a little bit different. The environment's different. So then, who here has heard of the big-eyed sixgill, or the long-nosed velvet dogfish? Or what about the velvet belly lantern shark? Anybody heard of them sharks? Show of hands. Maybe, yeah. So not many people. I certainly hadn't heard of them by the time I started my work here. So this was very exciting for me. And then there was loads and loads and loads of sharks down there. So about half of all sharks that we know of actually live in the deep sea. So these are the waters between 200 meters and about 4,000 meters. So half of the sharks we know are down there. Yet we know very little about these sharks. And that's because it's very hard to get to these environments. It's very, very deep. We don't see them often because they don't come to the surface. And we don't understand much about their biology. So it was a very exciting opportunity to actually get to work with these sharks. So I'm going to take you on an adventure now. Imagine you're in a submarine. We're going to get on a submarine. We're going to dive down into these deep sea, and we're going to see some of these species. And hopefully you've never seen some of them before. I've been quite lucky to be given some photographs of some sharks, and very, very few people have actually seen them. I only saw them a few days ago, and they really are breathtaking. So you are in for a bit of a treat, I hope. So as soon as we get into our submarine, we're going to be in the top layer. So that's where all those sharks I showed you before are, in this sunlight zone. So this is between about 0 meters, so that's the surface, and 200 meters. So here, sunlight can come into the ocean and can fuel lots of small little plants and animals. And these waters are very, very productive. So we see lots of fish, we see lots of corals, lots of plants, all sorts of animals up in this area of the ocean. But we're going to dive even deeper because we're bored of these sharks. Now, we've seen these sharks. These are the shallow water sharks. We want to see the cool deep sea sharks, right? So we're going to go a little bit deeper. We're going to go down into the twilight zone. So this twilight zone, or mesopelagic zone, is between 200 meters and 1,000 meters deep. It's not completely dark down there. If we look out the window and look up, we can still see the sunlight coming down, but it's very dark down here, and we don't have any plants growing, we don't have any primary productivity really. So it's actually reliant on those waters up top. But there are still animals that live here, and we'll come and meet a few of the sharks that live in this zone. And now we're going to go even deeper still, so we're going to go down to the midnight zone. So this is the bathypelagic zone. So this is between 1,000 meters and 4,000 meters deep, roughly. And down here you can see it's very dark, it's very cold, and there's some very high pressures here, almost crushing. There's no chance of us ever being able to dive down here ourselves. It would just be too great. Now you might think down here, so far away from the surface, this is 4,000 meters from the surface. How can anything live? But actually we do see things living down here. And the things that do live down here tend to be bioluminescence. That means they glow in the dark. So you look out the window of the submarine and it's not pitch black at all. You see lights coming on. You see these weird animals glowing in the dark. It's fish that you can't even imagine, they just look like something out of a weird dream. And these things are glowing in the dark, emitting their own light. We've got squids and jellyfish. So we can see that there's actually what we thought was a dark, inhospitable environment. It's actually home to a lot of different creatures and a huge variety of them as well. But because there's no light down here, they're actually reliant upon surface waters for their food, because otherwise they won't be able to eat. So if we pop back up to the surface again and take a look at this picture, we can see, can you see those white specks in the ocean there? And there's a jellyfish there as well. Now these are little small bits of plants, algae. We've got whole animals in there, bits of animal skin, and we've got animal poop as well. So when animals, eat their food and poop it out, we've got all this floating around in here. And this is actually what fuels the deep sea. So then this, all these particles, or what we call marine snow, fall down into the deep sea very slowly and then can fuel that whole ecosystem down there. So then we go down to 2,000 meters and we can see here all this marine snow falling down. So all these white specks here are bits of plant and animal from the surface that have fallen down into the deep sea. And this is what's fueling most of these ecosystems down here. We also have animals traveling up to those shallow waters and bringing food down. It's a very dynamic system, but it's very, very different to what we're used to. These ecosystems are very, very far from the surface, so it's very hard to actually see the sharks and even see the animals that live in these areas. So we have to use a few different methods to explore these worlds. I'll just show you a few of them now. So here's the submarine we just went down on in the top right here. So this is our submarine. So you can go down into the deep in this submarine and look. It's quite dangerous though, because you've got people in a big tin can really, and this tin can's moving around and you can see things. So nowadays we tend to use remotely operated vehicles, or ROVs, and they're just fancy robots on these tethers that we can send down to the deepest parts of the ocean, and we can attach it with cameras and probes and lights. We can actually see what these environments are like for ourselves, but with very little danger to ourselves. They're very, very expensive though, and they require very skilled people to use them. So a lot of the stuff I'm going to show you now is from a mixture of these baited remote underwater video systems, or BRUVs as we call them. So whenever I say BRUV, I just mean one of these baited underwater video systems. So that's what we can see here. And then we've got fishing gear as well. So fishermen can send down either nets or fishing lines, and we can bring the fish up to see us. And then from that we can get an idea of their biology, what they're doing, what they're moving. But it's really these new technologies that have only come around in the past 20, 30 years that have allowed us to explore these new alien worlds, as it were. So I'm just going to show you these baited remote underwater videos in a bit more detail now. So here's one of those here now. So we've actually sent an ROV down. We've sent a robot down to about 2,000 meters, and we've put a plate of food on the floor. So what you can see here is a plate of fish, and we've just tied some fish to it there. And then what we do, we set that down on the floor, and then we just leave it for 24 hours or something like that. And then with the camera that we're looking at now, we just watch what arrives at the food of plate, essentially. So then after about an hour, we start to see fish arrive. So these are weird-looking fish. So we've got a blobfish here in the middle, this very round, fat-faced fish. I've never seen anything like this up to, but it's very, very weird. You see all these fish are very dark in color as well. So this is a very black, fat fish. We've also got these eel-looking fish here as well. So this is a cutthroat eel, we call them. And these are big scavengers down there, so they're often quick to come to these free plates of food that we offer them down there. We've got a grenadier over here as well. But you can see, apart from that, there's not much else on the seafloor. So It's quite remarkable that these fish can actually find this food in amongst these depths. But then we get the exciting things. This is what we're down here for, is the sharks. So this is when the big sharks come along. So here we've got two species of shark, I think, and there's a fish in the middle there. But you can see it's very, very difficult to actually make out what these sharks are, like what they look like. I don't even know what their names are. And then because of all this marine snow and sediment that gets kicked up, it's actually very difficult to ID these sharks and actually get the names of them. But sometimes, we're very lucky, and then sometimes we'll get a very clear shot. So this is I love this photo. It's amazing. It's very clear, and this is what we think is a very small Portuguese dogfish. Now, it was quite amazing for me. These are one of the fish that one of the sharks that I'm actually interested in, and I've never seen one this small before. We don't see them in the fishing. We don't see them in catch records. So to see a shark this small on camera is something quite remarkable, really. So we can leave these free plates of food around, and we can record how many different species come and go, their kind of numbers, and then we can do this at different depths, and we can do this all around the world, and we can get some kind of idea of the types of sharks that live in these environments. So now I'm just going to introduce you to a few of these characters, a few of these deep sea beasts as they were. So let's stick with the Portuguese dogfish. So this is a small one, like I said. This is a baby. So let's go to an adult one. So this is what an adult Portuguese shark looks like, or Portuguese dogfish. Now they look very, very different to any sharks you might have seen. They don't look like white sharks. They don't look like bull sharks. You'll notice they're very dark in coloration. They've got this browny black skin. You see they have very, very, very large eyes. And also, with this species in particular, it has very rough skin, very big, big dermal denticles, we call them. It's just essentially scales or skin. These very, very, and this stops other sharks biting it or whales eating it. So it's one of the adaptations it has down here. And then we can also see at the back here, there's another species of shark, but it's just hidden here. We've got another little species of fish here, and there's a few little inverts in the back here as well. A few sea stars, some brittle stars. So you can see, in fact, these deep sea environments are very, very active. There's a lot of fish here. So from this footage, we can actually gain insights about their behavior. So what these sharks are doing, not only what sharks are there, but how they behave in these worlds. So we can see this for the first time. So this is that Portuguese shark again, and you can see it here tearing chunks of flesh off that free meal we've put down there for it. So this shark would latch on with its teeth, and because it can't really chew like we do, it hasn't got a knife and fork, it has to latch on, and then it thrashes its body around, much like a crocodile really, and then tears bits of meat away, and then from that it can get its food. We can see here as well there's other fish that are looking to get the scraps that this shark doesn't eat. So we've got another cutthroat eel, and we've got an I think it's an anti-mora here to the right. But yeah, no, very exciting image and a very cool shark. So now we'll move on to another shark, which is another favorite of mine and one that I'm researching. This one's called the leaf scale gulper shark. Quite a mouthful, but it gets its name because if you look at its skin very closely, its skin looks like little leaves from a tree. So this is why we call it the leaf scale gulper shark. So this one was taken at about 1,600 meters down. And you see there's lots of little baby eels as well around. But again, we see it's very dark in coloration. We can see it has very, very big eyes. And we can see that it has these spines or these spikes on its back as well. We don't get that with shallow water sharks, so this is another adaptation that it has, which we'll talk about in a bit. And from here as well, we can see it's a male individual as well. We can see here it's got two claspers. We call the male organs claspers. And we can tell that this is a male shark. So we can still get a lot of information from just a photograph, really. This is another image of that same species, that leaf scale gulper shark. But look at this, it's got these huge white lines down its back. We don't really know what that is. Like, I think that is actually the bites from an even bigger shark. These aren't mating scars. Mating scars are usually a similar size to the mouth here and occur up here, but these could be bite marks from a bigger shark. But you can see the defensive fin spine here at the back has served its purpose because it looks like it's been biting on at the back here, and this shark's got away because it's still alive, it's still swimming, but it's left these nasty looking scars along the back. We can also see it's got a couple of parasites on its tail as well. And it's very rare to actually observe these in the deep sea because we come across them. So to get images like this of parasites attached onto a shark is very, very useful. Okay, so I think that's the leaf scale gulper shark, and this is another grenadier up top here, but a very weird looking fish, almost alien-like, just a huge head with this very, very long tail. So the next shark we've got is this bird-beak dogfish. Now, one thing you will notice about all these sharks is that they're very, very similar. I don't know about you, but they look remarkably close to one another. This bird-beaked dogfish has a very, very long nose down here, so it uses this long nose to sniff around on the seafloor and in the midwater and detect injured fish and other bits of food that it might be able to eat. Again, we've got fin spines up here and at the back, and a very, very large eye. But sometimes photos aren't enough, so sometimes we have to bring these sharks up so we can inspect them further. So then we can get them into the laboratory like this, so that these ones were caught by fishermen, and we got them off the fishermen. But this is a similar species to the one I just showed you, but this is an arrowhead dogfish. And again, you can see this very, very long nose here at the top. Very, very distinctive long nose, very large eyes again. And this is actually the same species, even though they're different colors and different sizes. The top one is a female, and the bottom one is a male. And that's quite common in the shark world, so you tend to get the females much bigger than the males. And that's just so that the females can deal with pregnancy and reproducing. They need those extra food stores. And in the deep sea, where food is rare, it's very important to be big and to conserve your energy like this. So sometimes we do need to bring these sharks into the lab so we can inspect them a little bit further. Now, who here has heard of the cookie cutter shark? It's one of the more famous deep sea sharks. So this is a photograph that was taken at about 1,000 meters off Hawaii. I wasn't involved with the work, I just stumbled across it on the internet here. It was this Lambus Photography took it, but I thought it was amazing. You know, you could see this shark in the mid-water swimming. You can quite clearly see its very large eyes, and it has this reflective layer in the back, which we're going to come on to in a bit. And this shark is very unique. So like the other sharks, you saw them on the bottom, whereas this shark spends a lot of its time in the middle of the water. And because of that, it has a very, very different way of feeding. So would you believe it? This shark actually feeds on whales and dolphins. Now you might think that might be okay if it was a huge shark, but it's teeny. That's just a pencil you get in a classroom. So this shark is only about 50 centimeters, only about this big. Yet it feeds on whales and dolphins, which is quite amazing, really. You might be thinking, how do these little teeny sharks feed on such big, big creatures? Now this is how they get their name. So they have this rather spectacular row of teeth. What we can see here is a very specialized set of suction lips and some very, very sharp, pointy teeth. So what these sharks will do, they will swim along, they will latch onto the side of a dolphin or a whale or a fish, and they will take these perfect circular bite marks from them. So this is a tuna here that's had one of these shark bites on it, and you can see this weird, perfectly circular bite. It's only very small in comparison to the animal, so the fish and whale actually live, and you see a lot of free-living dolphins and whales with these bite marks still on them. But this is why the cookie cutter shark gets its name, because it leaves these cookie-shaped bites all over its prey. It's just a neat adaptation to surviving in a world where food is, quite rare. So we'll go from the small sharks, like the cookie cutter, all the way to big sharks. So we do get big sharks in the deep sea, so this is a big-eyed six-gill shark. So these bigger sharks tend to be in a bit more shallower water, so we do find these sometimes near the surface. And they go down to about 1,000 meters. But again, you can see these very large eyes. And these sharks are called cow sharks because they have these very rounded snouts. Almost like a little bit like a cow, some people say. I don't personally see it, but some people say they look like cows. And they have 6 gills instead of 5. So most sharks have 5 gills, but the blunt-nosed 6-gill and other cow sharks have 6 gills. And these sharks evolved, or they turned up on the scene about 100 million years ago. So these sharks were around near the dinosaurs, and they outlived all of the dinosaurs, and they're still going strong today. And part of their survival is thought that it's because they were able to dive down into the deep sea and survive down there. So in the deep sea, they were protected, as it were, from all the meteors that were crashing down and all the other disasters that were going up near the dinosaurs. So now on to my favorite shark. So this is a lantern shark. So from the big, again, to the small. So this is my pinky finger here down the bottom. And this is a velvet belly lantern shark. And if you look closely at its belly, you can see it almost looks furry, which is quite weird, wouldn't you think? So this is why it's called the velvet belly lantern shark. Now this furry skin, as it were, helps it with its very unique adaptation into the deep. And its name might give it away. So these sharks are able to glow in the dark. So we've got these glow-in-the-dark sharks living in the deep, quite remarkable, really. So any black bit here you see on this shark, so we've got a huge bit on its belly here, there's a bit at the back, we've got little bits on its fin here, all these bits here are covered in thousands of glowing cells, or what we call photophores, which just means light cell. And some of you might not believe me. You might not think, that sharks are able to glow in the dark. It seems a bit, alien, really. But then we just can go to this image and we can just see that this shark is able to actually glow in the dark. It produces this greeny blue light from its underside that it controls with hormones. We can see it's got these see-through fins as well on the side, so they're invisible essentially. And then also this glowing here helps it with camouflage. So you might think that glowing in the depths of the deep sea is a bit weird, really, because surely you're going to be like a free light to a free meal, But this light here is actually used for camouflage in a process we call counter-illumination. So I'm just going to show you quickly how that works. So this is a shark with no glowing cell. So this is looking up back to the surface, and this is the sun up here. So you can see that this is the silhouette. So as the sun shines down, we can see its silhouette or its shadow underneath. We can see its see-through fins, so we don't see them. But then by having a glowing belly, we see this shark almost disappears. So one of those big sharks we were showing you before, if they were to look up, they wouldn't actually see this shark because it's camouflaged, it's glowing. It's almost like a stealth ninja there. So it uses this to remain hidden in the deep sea. It also has other purposes, though. So not only does it have camouflage on its underbelly here, they have special markings on its side that they use to communicate with one another, so they can tell each other apart. Each species have a different pattern there, so they know which, they can go along to the species that are the same as them. We've also got these lightsabers on their back here. So these fin spines here have glowing cells just behind them. And in making themselves glow, these spines are see-through, and it makes them, like lightsabers. So they've got these big lightsabers on the back. So if any predator was to come down from above, they would see these lightsabers and decide, nah, I don't want to eat that. I'm going to get a big spike in my mouth, like chewing down on a toothpick or something. So that's quite remarkable. So then, not all sharks can glow in the dark in the deep sea. So there's only two families that can glow. So we've got the lantern sharks and the kite fin sharks. But there are other adaptations that many of these deep sea sharks do share. So one of them, as I've pointed out at many of the sharks we've been going through, is that they have these very, very big eyes. So we can see here with this short-nosed spur dog, which we caught in the Mediterranean, it has these very, very big eyes. And it uses this to detect any little bit of light that it can see. So when they're down there, they're looking for these glowing prey, they're looking for other glowing bits and bobs, and they're using these eyes to hunt and forage. Not only that, they also have this reflective layer in the back. So much like a cat's eye, I don't know if you've seen cat's eyes, but if you shine a light on them, they reflect back at you, and it's exactly the same with sharks. And this is a special adaptation to help them see in the dark, and they can absorb the light twice. In addition to these large eyes, they also have a very, very good sense of smell, and they can also detect electrical impulses given off by prey. So using these sensors, they're able to actually be very, very successful predators in the deep, and then they can always home in on anything that's fallen down from the shallow waters and eat it quite quickly. We can also see here these fin spines that I was talking about before. So they're like medieval weapons or daggers that they have on their back. We don't see these in shallow water sharks at all. I don't see any white sharks or bull sharks with these huge spikes on their back. But you can see here these very, very sharp spikes, and this stops other things eating them. These sharks spend a lot of time on the seafloor. So if you're spending a lot of time on the seafloor, you're very vulnerable to attack from above. So from other big sharks or whales or even squid. Can take on these sharks. So these spikes here stop anything chomping down on them and act like a means of protection, really. That doesn't always work, though. So the birdbeak dogfish on the right, there was a recent finding that they pulled up this giant squid from the depths of the ocean. It actually had a shark in its belly. So we've got deep sea squid eating sharks. Completely new to me, completely new to science, and we didn't really know that that was going on until this happened. Another thing with the deep sea, because there's so little food down there, they have to be slightly different in their biology. So these sharks tend to have very slow metabolism, and that's just a fancy way of saying how they use their energy. So when you don't get that much energy down there, because you're eating very often, you have to burn your energy very slowly. So many of these sharks have a very, very slow pace of life. They don't really need to be fast. They don't need to be active. Because there's very little light down there, they don't need to be able to chase things, because if they were to chase things, I think they would lose them pretty quick. So these sharks are very much opportunistic. They're kind of sniffing around on the seafloor, looking for kind of food when they can get it. But in doing so, they're very slow growing as well. They have very few offspring. They mature at a very late age, and they live for a very long time, all because of this slow metabolism and in this special way of conserving energy down there. So this is our leaf scale gulper shark again. And these sharks can actually reach a whopping age of 75 years old, we think. That's very, very old. And they don't actually reach maturity, as they can't start reproducing until they're about 35, which is kind of, that's older than us. And because of this, they're very, very vulnerable to fishing. Because they grow very slowly, if fishermen were to take them out of the ocean, their populations just can't recover. We can't get enough baby sharks back into the system to just sustain these guys down here. So unfortunately, what makes them very, very successful predators down there actually makes them very, very vulnerable to fishing, which is a shame. Another adaptation as well is they have these very, very large livers. So this is just one of them sharks that we've brought back to the lab, and we've cut open to have a look inside. And this is actually very, very useful for us. So from this we can understand, we can have a look at its stomach and see what's in its stomach. We can have a look at its reproductive biology, and we can understand how these sharks work. But what we can see is that this shark has very, very large livers. These livers span the whole length of its body, and it uses these for buoyancy. So unlike fish that use their swim bladders to move up and down in the water, these deep sea sharks, and like all sharks actually, they use oil in their livers, and they can produce more of it or excrete more of it, and in doing so they can affect their position in the water. But because of these large livers, these sharks need to feed very frequently to sustain them. So they don't actually go down too deep, so they're actually constrained to about 4,000 meters. You don't actually see any sharks deeper down than that really. But these large livers are actually what are targeted by fishermen, would you believe? So they don't actually, they do use the meat, but they're actually after these livers. So the squalene, or that oil that we get in these livers, is used in a whole wide array of things here. So we've got dietary supplements, medicines. There's a lot of studies saying that it's antibiotics, it can stop cancer, it's antifungal. And while some of the studies are true, it's not an appropriate way to obtain it. We can actually get squalene from olive oil, but fishermen still find it a cheaper alternative to go out and hunt these sharks. And one of the surprising things for me is that a lot of cosmetic companies used to use shark liver oil in face creams and sun cream. So when you were rubbing sun cream or face cream, sometimes there'd be liver oil. But then now that has changed, and a lot of cosmetic companies have stopped using deep sea shark because they know it's very bad. But still, they are fished heavily. So as fish populations have decreased in shallow waters, fisheries have moved out to deeper waters in search of fish. So here we can see a huge boat here with two huge reels of fishing line at the back here, and they would send these out into the deep, and they can sink them down to about 2,000 meters and scoop up all the fish in its way, so they can drag these nets along the seafloor for about anywhere up to 2 hours really, and more if they wanted to. But unfortunately, this method of fishing is very, very bad, because as you can see, they catch everything in there. They're not very selective. So in here we've got sharks, we've got fish, you see some octopus here, there's some more fish, there's a sea star here, there's all sorts in there. So it's very, very non-selective. So actually they may only be after the fish, but the sharks are getting caught as well by accident. And that's not good news for these sharks, because as we've just seen, they don't deal well with fishing. But as all these fishermen are still operating down there, these populations are under huge threat. And as we've seen, like, these deep sea environments aren't just barren landscapes. These are very complex environments, and the populations down here are very, very important to actually the health of the oceans and the health of these systems down here. So these sharks actually capture a lot of carbon. So there's increases in carbon dioxide at the moment from pollution and burning fossil fuels. And the ocean is actually a big storage for that. So these oceans are actually mitigating or slowing down the process by providing a carbon sink. So a lot of this marine snow is captured by these sharks, and they're actually capturing a lot of carbon that would otherwise be released into the environment. So as we can see, they are very, very important systems and very, very important animals. We still don't know much about them. My research is hopefully going to uncover some of their movements, their behaviors, and really their role in these environments. How important are they down there? What would happen if we took the deep sea sharks out? If we learn anything from shallow water systems, we know that all the other populations of fishes get thrown off balance. So the ecosystem is just one big balance really. And then if you take one big shark out of it, you're going to have drastic consequences that could cascade throughout an ecosystem, and could ultimately, be very, very bad for us. And we're going to lose services. We're going to not be able to eat the fish we want to eat. We're going to have too much carbon dioxide in the air. So we really do need to, study these deep sea environments in more detail and find out more about them, because they're very, very important. So yeah, I hope you've liked this quite a brief introduction to deep sea sharks. If any of you teachers or the classes want to find more of these amazing pictures, you can find that, go back here. But if we go to the Andrew Gates has some great ones from the Serpent Project, and also Alan Jameson up at the Aberdeen University operates the Ocean Lab. If you go onto those two websites, you can see some more amazing pictures of these alien worlds. So yeah, hopefully you guys have enjoyed that, and I'm happy to take some of your questions now.
All right. Chris, that was awesome. Thank you so much.
No problem. You guys heard me okay?
Yeah, the volume was perfect. We could hear you perfect. I just want to take a moment to apologize to some of the classes who weren't able to make it. We did have a crash at the beginning, so we did lose our class from Wisconsin, Miss Wineski's class, and some classes were able to find their way. They're watching live, so feel free to send a message on the event page so we know who's watching and where you're from, and if you have any questions, we'll try to get to some of them. But Chris, that was awesome. I'm so glad we were able to work out the tech and get that presentation in.
Yeah,
so
no, that's good. Glad I could share it with you guys.
Awesome. So let's move on to our first class. Let's go to Jonesville Middle School. There are 6th and 7th graders. I know they have a couple questions for us. Let me just turn their mic on. Okay. Well, it seems like our tech issues are still chasing us down. Mrs. Nicodem, if you can hear me, can you try and turn the mic on from your end? There we go.
Awesome.
All right, now, how can I become a shark scientist or researcher?
Good question, yeah. Okay, so I guess I was very much like you. I was interested in fish and sharks and wanted to do that. So what I did, I kind of worked really hard at school. I studied the sciences, and then from that just kind of volunteered myself out and just tried to get as much experience as possible. So a lot of the time I sent a lot of emails, got in touch with shark biologists, see if they needed any help with any of their work, if I could do anything in the lab with them. And then slowly but surely people would let me help them out, and then I kind of built up a bit of a kind of portfolio, as it were, and experience around it, and then from that just I've ended up here kind of doing my PhD research in sharks. Really quite lucky with some of the experiences I've had, but yeah, no, it's a lot of hard work in school, and you can be anything you want to be, really.
All right, great question. I know we've got one more for sure from that class.
Okay. Your turn. Talk loud.
Are there any deep sea sharks that are almost extinct?
Now that is a very good question. So the deep sea is a very hard environment to observe. So as you've seen, we can't see many of the sharks down there. And a lot of the species that we know from the deep sea, we've only seen them a handful of times throughout the whole of history. There's a shark called a megamouth shark, and we've only seen it 76 times. 60 times, not 76 times, 60 times. So it's very hard to assess if these sharks are, vulnerable or going extinct. But as you've seen from the fishing, they're very, very vulnerable. A lot of their numbers are crashing now, and we're losing a lot of the sharks out of the oceans. So yeah, no, they are in threat of extinction, but the specific ones, it's too hard to tell at this stage.
Great question. Just gonna see if I can mute the mic again on my end. Apparently not. Do you mind muting the mic again for me, Mrs. Nicodem? Thank you very much. And we'll take a look. Let's talk to our class in Mount Prospect, Illinois. Get that up and running.
They see you all big, but because that's our camera, we see, but they're seeing you big when you go there.
Okay. Well, it's like the tech problems aren't going to end anytime soon. So, Mrs. Santini, if you can hear me, do you mind turning your microphone on?
All right.
Hello?
There we go. All right.
Go ahead. So we've been learning, we studied this year about weather patterns, and we're wondering if, we're wondering how global climate change affects sharks.
Okay, it's a good question. So the deep sea, because it is so far away from the surface, in surface waters we've generally got a slow warming of waters. But in the deep sea, they're very stable and they're almost protected from this climate change. So we haven't actually seen increases in temperature like we've seen in shallow waters. But that's not to say that they're not threatened by climate change. The biggest threat to the deep sea is the fishing at the moment. So whilst they're protected from climate change to some extent, they're very vulnerable to fishing. But over time, if climate change keeps increasing and getting warmer and warmer, we might see the effects going down into the deep sea.
Great, thank you. Go ahead.
No problem.
So, you were talking about how DNA mutations change someone's life. So, are there any DNA mutations that hurt sharks?
Any DNA mutations that hurt sharks? Okay, that's a tough one. So millions and millions of years ago, through evolution, we've had mutations that have led to all these different types of sharks. So we had sharks moving down into the deep sea, and then from that, they were forming different species. But in forms of mutations, not so much in the deep sea. I know of shallow water sharks, though. In the Indian Ocean, we were getting a load of sharks that were turning up with fin deformations. They were missing parts of their nose, and we think that was from pollution. So this pollution was causing these DNA mutations of these sharks. And we also see sharks with cancer as well. So that's kind of bad.
Yeah.
Great. Wait, you gotta walk up by the mic. Okay.
Are there any squids that are living in any place else except under the sea?
Sorry, say again. I didn't catch that.
Okay.
Are there any squids living anywhere else than where they live?
Any squids?
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, like, there's huge squids that live down in the deep sea, and a lot of the. So can you remember the Twilight Zone? There's a lot of squid that move from the shallow water down to the deep sea, and they move daily. So they move from shallow water down to deep water, and these squids can actually migrate between these two ocean zones. But yeah, in the deep sea, we're always uncovering new things. So like I said before, there was a squid that turned up with a deep sea shark in its stomach. So the deep sea really is one of the last places that is still mysterious to us, and we're still uncovering lots about it. Yeah, so I don't really know too much about squid. I just know about how they eat sharks and how sharks eat squid.
Hey, thank you.
No worries.
Great questions. Mrs. Santini, do you mind turning your mic off for us? We seem to have lost all control on our end. Thank you very much. Let's jump over to, who haven't we visited? Fort Stewart, Georgia, the Knights. Do you have some questions for us, 5th grade? You'll have to turn your mic on for us because we can't control it on our end anymore. So Miss Burkeen's class. There we go.
Okay, hurry up. They're waiting. What's in the jars?
What are in the jars behind you?
Good question. I was hoping someone was going to ask that. So I've actually, throughout my research, I've been able to collect several specimens of deep sea sharks. So I can show a few of them to you now, actually. Give us a second. So, get this one. So in this jar here, we've got that cookie cutter shark we were on about. Can you guys see that?
Yeah.
So in here, you can see that dark collar underneath there. If we go around a bit further, we might be able to see its teeth. But yeah, so this is a cookie cutter shark from about 1,100 meters. In this one here, we've got a bird beak dogfish baby. So we can see its very, very long nose there. You can see its fin spines. We can see its umbilical cord there. That yellow thing popping out is its umbilical cord. So during my research, I can collect sharks and bring them back, and I use them on open days. I use them in classes I teach. But also from this, we can look at their biology, so we can look at how big they are and what their teeth look like, what their skin look like. So back here in all the jars, we've got lots of different species of deep sea shark, which we're very lucky to have here.
I'm going to switch computers real quick.
Yeah, no problem.
I'm doing PLT of friendship.
Oh, gosh. Oh, my goodness. Well, thanks, Mrs.
But
Santini.
you're signed in as you.
Okay. Sounds good.
All right, great question. Do we have another one?
Go ahead.
From our Knights in Fort Stewart, Georgia.
Oh. But also from this, we can.
What does their diet consist of?
What does their diet consist of? Is that what you said?
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah. Cool. So we still don't know for a lot of species because we're still learning. We only catch them rarely, and rarely do they make it back to the scientists. But we know that a lot of them have quite a varied diet. So from fish and squid seem to make up a large part of that diet, and also whales and dolphins. So we know that they scavenge. So when whales and dolphins and other big fish die, they sink down to the deep sea, and these sharks are able to feed on them. They have a very, very broad diet, but we're still learning about a lot of the species. We don't actually know the full extent to the food that they're able to eat. But down there, when food's very rare, I'd imagine they will eat anything and anything they come across. They're not picky eaters.
Great questions. Let's jump over to looks like we may have lost a class. Nope, they're there. They're still here. So Mount Prospect, Illinois, Miss Santini, we've covered your questions. Mrs. Nicoderm, Miss Birkin, and we don't seem to have Miss WFs and Club Koala anymore. We must have lost them in the shuffle. So, Chris, I do have two questions from one of our classes that we lost earlier.
Say hi.
Perfect. Go ahead with your questions.
All right.
Better coming from you than me.
Yeah. So, Lucas, grab your question. Come on up front. Yep, and use a good teacher voice. Over there, Ben.
What's your question, dude?
When do deep sea sharks hunt?
Where do they hunt?
When? Yes. When?
Yeah.
When? Oh, okay, yeah, good. That's a very, very good question, actually. And part of what my research is interested in, really, is where they hunt and when they hunt. So, shallow water sharks, we know, hunt, in the daytime, but there's a lot that are very active at nighttime. And that seems to be the case in the deep sea as well. We see a lot of sharks moving up to shallow waters at nighttime to hunt on these migrating squid that I was on about before. Because it's very hard to observe them directly, I think they hunt all the time. I think they're always hungry and they're always trying to feed. So when they do feed, when there is food available, they will eat it. But certainly in some species of shark, we see them coming to shallow waters at nighttime. And this is to feed. And then when it gets light again, they move back down into deeper waters. And this happens on a daily basis. So they have these huge, huge movements up and down in the water to try and hunt for prey, making the most out of the light when it's available.
Okay.
It's a good question,
Great.
though.
All right, awesome question. I know you have one more for sure for us.
Do deep sea sharks sleep?
Do you see deep sea sharks sleep? No, I don't think they do. I think, well, yeah, I guess they do. They so many sharks have to keep swimming to breathe, but the deep sea sharks don't need to do that. They've got two kind of air holes on their back that well, not air holes, but spiracles we call them, that they can pump water over. So a lot of the time when we look at the footage, we can see these sharks just resting on the sea floor. So they're not so much resting, not so much sleeping, but more resting. And they do this resting so they can conserve energy. So yeah, it's a question I hadn't ever thought about really. So I guess they do sleep, but not really sleeping. They're more resting. Yeah, they don't close their eyes. They're always still looking for food and smelling food out. But yeah, a lot of resting, no sleeping.
Okay.
All right. Great question. I'm going to try to mute your mic and see if...
No, we can do it.
All right, if you don't mind doing it for me. We're definitely having technical difficulties today. But I do want to give a shout out to a few classes who I know are watching online right now. A couple classes in Texas. So we have Miss Smith's first grade class in Dallas. And then it looks like we also have Mrs. Watson's third grade class in Houston. So thank you for joining us. And they do, let's see, they posted a couple questions for us. So let's take a look at one of them. How long, Chris, can a cookie cutter shark go without eating? Do you have an idea?
Oh, God.
That question.
How long can it go without eating for? So as I said, these sharks have a very slow way of life, and often when we find these sharks, they have nothing in their stomachs. Their stomachs are completely empty. So we think that these deep-sea sharks can go a long time without feeding, actually. But for the cookie cutter, I'm not entirely sure, but it will be able to go a significant amount of time without feeding. We do know, though, that a lot of whales and dolphins and big fish are found with these cookie cutter bites on them. So it must mean that they're feeding quite regularly, or they're in high numbers and they're feeding in a certain area. But in terms of days, I don't know how long. We still don't know about the deep sea. That's part of the mystery and why I love the deep sea. A lot of these questions we don't actually know the answer to. And this is one of them. We don't know how long they can go without food, but it'll probably be quite a while it can go.
All right. Well, hopefully we have some future deep-sea shark scientists who can help research and answer some of these questions.
Yes, it's much needed.
Yeah. So very early we did have Miss Wineski's class, and we did end up losing them, but I do have their questions, so maybe we can sneak a couple in. So why is the deep-sea shark important to mankind?
That's really the main question of my research, kind of almost, is why are these deep sea sharks important? We know from shallow systems that deep sea sharks, that sharks in general are very, very important predators. They maintain the health of the food webs there, and then if they're taken out, the whole food web's off balance. And I think that's very much the same in the deep sea. So if the deep sea sharks were to be removed, a lot of these other fishes might increase in numbers that might then destroy other bits of the food web that are important to us. And as I said, these deep sea environments are very important for carbon storage. So they store a lot of carbon that would otherwise be released into the atmosphere and cause global warming. So these deep sea sharks are probably very important for the health of our fish stock. So we like eating fish. So in the deep sea, they are connected, the deep sea and the shallow. So these sharks probably are helping that. And then also with this carbon storage as well.
Okay, great answer and a great question. We are close to the end of our time, so maybe we still have a few classes with us. Maybe we can cycle through once more, see if they have maybe one more question for us. So let's see, let's visit Jonesville, Mrs. Nicodem and Mrs. Crumley. If you want to turn your mic on for me, and maybe one more question for Chris before we sign off. Here they come.
Okay.
All right, well, thank you for being an interactive part of our presentation.
Ask your question, then.
Which shark do you think is the most interesting?
That's an awesome question. I've got a few kind of big favorites, really, and that, from an interesting point of view. I've got one of them behind me, actually, so just give us a second. So this one in here, you see this very, very small shark here. This is a lantern shark. And I went over that in the talk study. These are the glow-in-the-dark sharks. I just find they're amazing. There's just these, glow-in-the-dark sharks down there. It's absolutely fascinating. And there's so many species of them as well, and we don't really actually understand how many species there are down there yet. They're one of the ones that we are still uncovering more and more about every day. And the other one that I really, really find fascinating is the megamouth shark. And that's the one that they've only seen 60 times. This is a huge, huge deep-sea shark, but it feeds on the smallest things in the ocean, much like a whale or a basking shark or a whale shark. This deep-sea shark feeds on the smallest parts of the ocean. Because we've only seen it 60 times, we know very, very little about it. So I'm hoping that there's going to be more research in the future when we can uncover where they are, what they're doing, and how they might be important to us. But no, awesome question. Hopefully you guys have your new favorite sharks.
All right. Let's check in with Miss Berkey's 5th grade class again and see if maybe they have one more question for Chris before we wrap up. You'll have to turn your mic on for us. Thank you.
We gotta go. Not your turn. Come on, Dragons. Thank you. And but we gotta go.
Sorry, I can't hear. You have to come closer.
Come closer.
It's time for us to go, so thank you and have a great time.
Oh, no problem. Yeah, glad you could join us. Hope you took something away from it and you have a new love for the deep sea like I do.
Thank you.
See you later, guys. Oh, I think you're muted, Joe. Joe, I think you're muted. Can you guys hear Joe?
No.
Oh, there we go. Mike's back. Awesome.
Yeah,
Thank you so much, Chris, for joining us today and our absolutely crazy Google session. We've had 4 so far, and they've been flawless, so I guess it was just waiting for a time to ambush us. But I think we pulled it off really well. Your presentation was amazing, and with a little help from our classes, we were able to get the questions in. So, yeah, we're going to, for the classes who weren't able to watch or couldn't find the new link, it goes live to YouTube, so we can watch in the future at any time. We're also excited to talk about, actually, Chris and I have been working on a deep sea shark package, a curriculum package. So instructions for viewing and using some of those resources are coming very soon, so keep your eyes on your inboxes, and I'll post it on the event page as well. And Chris, if you want to wrap up with goodbye or anything to add about the deep sea sharks or the future, that would be awesome.
Yeah, no, it's been great being able to speak to you guys in the US and Canada, all the way from the UK over here. It's such a great opportunity. And yeah, hopefully you've seen that the deep sea can be a beautiful place and that these sharks, do exist down there and they are fascinating. We're still learning more and more about them. So hopefully that's driven your hunger for, the deep sea. So hopefully now you can look at the packages that Joe was talking about and learn more about the deep sea in the future. But no, yeah, thanks again for having me along, Joe. It's been great.
All right, Chris, thanks very much. If you want to hold on at the end, we can chat just for a moment.
Yeah,
and,
no problem.
All the classes who joined us, thank you for the amazing questions. Thank you for your patience with the wild world of the internet, but I think we did pretty well. So thanks again, and keep your eyes peeled for June, because we do have some big announcements. We're going to do multiple sessions in June, Hangout, so that's coming soon. And don't forget to visit Sharks4Kids. Check out our website, curriculum videos, YouTube page, Instagram, Twitter, and keep up with all that's going on with our Sharky adventures and the new curriculum that's coming out. So thanks again, and enjoy the rest of your week. All right.
See you later, guys.
Thank you.
Thank you.